Korea, a land split in two. In 1945, after decades of Japanese colonial rule, the Korean peninsula was liberated. But liberation didn't mean peace. Instead, the country was divided at the 38th parallel, the north occupied by the Soviet Union, the south supported by the United States. Two halves of one nation, drifting apart in the growing chill of the Cold War. By 1948, two rival states had emerged, a communist north led by Kim Il-sung and an anti-communist south under Syngman Rhee. Both leaders dreamed of unifying the country under their own ideology. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came on June 25, 1950. North Korean forces launched a massive, full-scale invasion across the 38th parallel. The South Korean army was overwhelmed, and within days, the capital, Seoul, had fallen. The world watched in shock. This wasn't just a regional conflict anymore. It was the first major test of the new global order. The United Nations responded immediately. A coalition, led by the United States, rushed to defend the South. At first, they were pushed back into a tiny defensive corner known as the Pusan Perimeter. It was a desperate fight for survival. Then, in September 1950, General Douglas MacArthur turned the tide with a gamble that defined the war, the Incheon Landing. By launching an amphibious assault hundreds of miles behind enemy lines, he cut off the North Korean supply chain and forced a chaotic retreat. The UN forces pushed north, aiming to unify the country, but they had miscalculated. China, fearing a hostile border, entered the war in late 1950. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers swarmed across the frozen Yalu River, catching UN forces by surprise. The war devolved into a brutal, frozen stalemate. For 2 years, soldiers fought for every inch of mountain, living in trenches that mirrored the horrors of World War I. Battles like the Chosin Reservoir became legends of endurance, where men fought hand-to-hand in sub-zero temperatures. The air war was equally devastating, with strategic bombing campaigns leveling nearly every major city in the north. Millions of lives were lost, and the peninsula was left in ruins. Finally, in July 1953, the guns fell silent. An armistice was signed at Panmunjom. But it wasn't a peace treaty, it was only a ceasefire. The border was locked near the original 38th parallel, protected by the demilitarized zone. Today, the DMZ remains one of the most heavily armed borders on Earth. The North and South are still technically at war, separated by wire, watchtowers, and decades of distrust. The South has risen into a global tech powerhouse, while the North remains isolated. The Korean War is often called the Forgotten War, overshadowed by the conflicts that came before and after it. But it remains a defining moment of the 20th century. It shaped our alliances, tested our resolve, and left a scar on the peninsula that has yet to heal. It is a story of division, resilience, and the enduring, fragile hope for one day being whole again.